Alright, so there are 14 learning points to be had for the class of 3rd July 2026 for the subject of CSA. And without further ado, let's get started. So firstly, as you can tell, these statutory registers, which are from 1 to 10 of Activity 1, come with non-compliance penalties, such as a fine. Alright? The first learning point is actually about the private company. But firstly, let's look at what the public company's register of members entails. So the first thing you need to know about public companies is that the register can be either in hard copy or electronic form. And this register is actually kept at the register office of the company or any other place, which in this case, you must notify ICRA that you're not keeping it at the register office. Now, this is for the public company, right? Simple. Hard copy or electronic. Register office or anywhere else in which you notify ICRA. Now, the first learning point concerns the private company as mentioned before. For the private company, it's a bit different because firstly, you don't have a choice. You don't have the luxury of choice. It must be an electronic register and it will be maintained and kept by ICRA. But on top of that, you must also keep an old register for 7 years after the last member stops being a member. So there are two things that you must keep as a private company. First is the electronic register, which is actually not your duty, it's kept with ICRA. And the second one is the old register, which must be kept at the company. Right? Now, we'll look at the second learning point, which is that directors/CEOs must notify the company within 2 business days after they have new shares or interest in the company. Now, at this case, at this stage, you need to remember that for a director and CEO, right, there's different obligations to declare their shares. So if I write when must the director declare his shares in the company, the answer will be different from when must a CEO declare his shares in the company also. Right, we'll be revisiting this, but before I move on, I want you all to remember this word. And this word is called construction. So what does it mean? Just bear this in mind. We'll be revisiting this in the later part of the video. But just know 2 business days, yeah? And there are different requirements for director and CEO. Now, moving on to the third learning point. Oops, that's my hidden folder. So moving on to the third learning point, which is about inspection, right? Let me find it. So, usually members free of charge to inspect the document. For non-members, there is actually a fee. And inspection is actually different from making a copy. So if I could put down the third learning point, it will be inspecting the documents versus making a copy. So an inspection can be done by members of the company or non-members of the company, which in this case will mean members of the public. So inspection versus making a copy. And when you make a copy, it's typically about $1 or less per a copy. So just bear that in mind, and I'm going to turn that red. Now, the fourth learning point is actually to do with the registers of directors, CEOs, secretaries, and auditors. And remember, there's a difference between the register of directors and register of directors shareholdings. And you can actually figure out the details if you read the tutorial or you look at the slides. So the fourth point is basically regarding the statutory right. So this is actually related to the third point about inspection, right? The keyword here is statutory right because directors, CEOs, secretaries, auditors, and plus ICRA, they have the statutory right to inspect the registers. However, if you can actually look at the slides, right? For this kind of registers, it's actually different from the other kind of registers. What do I mean by this? If you go to the slides, they won't actually put how can non-members or rather members of the public inspect the registers. And I can prove it to you. You see, this is not for register of direct. This is for, sorry. We go to the register of directors, CEOs, right? See, it says by director, CEO, secretary, auditor, there is is free of charge, but they never say anything about non-members. Whereas you go to a different register, like register of charges, for example, by other persons, meaning by the public, it costs $2. So the keyword is statutory right. It's up to the company's discretion to show the non-members the registers of directors or not, and ACRA will prescribe the fee. I don't really think it's that deep. Now the fifth learning point, wait, let me scroll. Okay, so the fifth learning point is actually connected to what I just mentioned. For register of controllers, nominee directors, and nominee shareholders, they are not open for public inspection, as to say the public is prohibited from viewing them. So non-members of the company, or rather members of the public, are not allowed to view these kinds of registers. So who can actually view them? Well, ACRA can view them. But on top of ACRA, the directors, secretaries, and the people, or rather the officers in charge of safeguarding and keeping these documents, are allowed to view these nominee registers. So that is the fifth learning point. Some registers have prohibitions, such as who cannot view versus who can view. Now, the sixth learning point is actually related to directors, CEOs, secretaries, and auditors, or more specifically, their register. In the slides, they actually said, they actually put all of them together in one line, but in reality, each director, CEO, secretary, and auditor actually has one register each. So there'll be a register for a director and another register for a CEO when it comes to shareholdings or interests. Then for the seventh learning point, I actually have to make a new page because it's going to be a very long one. It's regarding the register of directors, shareholdings, and interests, or the register of CEOs, shareholdings, and interests. Remember, there is one register for each. The slides just lump them together in one line. So for this, you actually have to look at section 164. Okay, I'm back. My storage died. So let's look at section 164, subsection 1, subsection A. The director must have a register showing his interest and shares in the company and or in a related corporation. So this is scenario number 1. Right? This is person A, okay, and he is director of company X, and he owns 10% shares in company B. Okay, these two companies are not related. So let's look at the register. I'm going to put short form, register of directors' interest in shares of company A. Okay, so okay, by the way, he's only the director of company X, yeah? Sorry, it's supposed to be X. This means that A does not actually have any shares in company X. He only has shares in company B, right? He does not no need to declare anything then. Declare anything, right? A does not need to declare anything because, as the law says, he only must do it if the company is a related corporation. But if he's a director and he owns 10% shares, right, in company X, he must declare in the register of directors interest in shareholdings of company X that he owns 10% of X. But that is only if he owns shares in X. Right now, that is not the case. So we focus on the red ink. Okay, now scenario 2 is actually what the law is asking for. Okay, if I could copy and paste this, right? Now in this case, okay, I'm gonna erase this one. In this case, the two companies are related. How? It can be 1 to 99%, right? This means that in the register of register of directors' interest in shareholdings of company X, A has to declare he has shares in B, and if he also has shares in company X, he also has to declare that he has 10% of X. But now he is just director of X, no shares. Now scenario 3 is actually the exception of section 164 subsection 2, which is to say that yes, the two companies are still related, but now it's 100%. So when it comes to 100%, it becomes, what does it become? It becomes wholly owned subsidiary, which is 100%, and the exception applies, and therefore no need to declare anything. So that is learning point number 7. And remember, just now I said that you have to keep in mind this construction, right? So when must director declare? I already mentioned it's section 164, and you have to look at section 164(2) for the exception. But when you look at, so this is, I'm going to put learning point 8, okay? This is learning point 8. But when must the CEO declare the interest in the company? So for that, you actually have to go to section 164, subsection 1A, subsection A. So shares in that company. So as you can see the difference, for CEO, it just says shares in that company. But for a director, it says shares in that company or in a related corporation. So CEO does not need to declare in the register of the CEO's interest in shareholdings for the related companies. So regardless of company X owning 99% or 100%, the CEO does not need to declare, which is different from director. And that's why I wrote the word construction here, because you need to get good with your construction of the law to interpret it correctly. Now we go to learning point number 9, which is here. Learning point number 9, which is about substantial shareholders. So just need to know that for substantial shareholders, they're talking about voting rights or shares that are more than or equal to 5%. Okay, then with that said, we can move on to learning point number 10, which I think I wrote here, which is that if you go to section 164, subsection 15, which is here, right? If your wife, husband, or child hold shares, the director also has shares. And why do you need to know that? Is to answer this question here. Where is it? Here. Yeah. So this is learning point number 10 actually. Right, so you apply 164 subsection 15 to answer this question, which I got wrong. Now learning point number 11 is that a charge is a collateral. So remember, think back on conveyancing, right? If a property is mortgaged, you have to give the bank a charge, or rather the bank gives you a charge over the property as security, so you pay back the mortgage, right? Now for charge, there are 3 things you need to know. First thing is a non-registrable charge, right? This is for learning point 11, by the way. The second kind of charges are registered charges, which are like your mortgages, things that you have learned in conveyancing, right? And then as for the terminology, instrument of charge is the form and the contents inside the charge. Sorry, it's just the form. Basically, the contract that you sign. But for particulars of charge is the contents. So I think there was this question. Okay, sorry, there's no question about the charges. But yeah, You need to know these 4 different terminology when it comes to a charge, when it comes to register of charges. Yeah, so this is actually your learning point number 11. So non-registerable charges. How do you know when a charge is registerable? You go to section 131 subsection 3, and then these are the 2 terminologies you need to know: instrument of charge versus particulars of charge. Now, register of controllers. This is the learning point number 12 here. Now, for register of controller, it's actually 25% or more shares / voting rights, and it's defined as significant interest or significant control in the 16th schedule to be such. Okay, and register of controllers can be an individual, as in a person, or a company. And remember, you have to know the prohibitions when it comes to inspection, right? Non-members are not allowed to inspect. It's not open to public. Now, for 13, please pay closer attention, yeah? So, it goes, nominee directors are directors with same duties, right? And if the nominee director has a share, he's also considered a nominee shareholder. So if you go to the very below questions, so right, in this scenario, this fella, which is Donnie, he is actually the nominee director and a nominee member. So he's a nominee director and nominee member of this company. And remember, member and shareholders can be used interchangeably. So, firstly, right, he is in the register of nominee directors because, you know, the name suggests. Secondly, he's also in the register of directors because nominee directors are directors with the same duties. So the law treats them as one. For all you know, you have to be in both registers. The third one is, since, you know, as a director, he also has shares, he's also considered to be in the register of director shareholdings. And since he is a nominee member, he also has to be in the register of nominee shareholdings and also in the register of shareholders, because nominee shareholder is a subset of register of shareholders. And yeah, I don't know why I repeated this twice. Now the question is, how about the nominator, the person that nominates Donnie, right, with her shares? Can the nominator be in the register? No, because beneficial members are not member. What this means is that, right, an example is Germax, who is the beneficial member, pays Kai $3 to buy shares, right? Kai's name will be reflected in the register of nominee members, but Germax's name will not be, because Germax is a beneficial member and beneficial members are not recognized as members. And that is essentially the 14th point now. Yeah, so these 2 points are kind of the same. And what else? Yeah, so that's pretty much it. For activity 3, it's very straightforward. It's related to the principle of learning point number 3 and number 4, which is about inspection versus making a copy and who is not allowed to view. And activity number 4, it's not that deep, you can just read it on your own. Alright, thank you and enjoy revision. Bye bye.